All right, everyone, let's get this presentation going. My name is Richard Carlton. This presentation is on modifying your FileMaker databases for effective use on the iPad and iPhone devices. We have been drinking lots of caffeine today, so we're fully loaded and ready to take this presentation all the way to the end. We are going to attempt to entertain questions along the way, so if you do have questions, feel free to stop and ask. My history has been 20 years of doing FileMaker development, and that, of course, is started off years ago, and we've learned a lot along the way. And of course, the newest technology here we have is the FileMaker Go application. This is the FileMaker app that runs on the iPhone and iPad, and was developed by FileMaker over the last 12 months and was shipped right around the first week or so of August, actually right before that, the last part of July. So anyway, my company has been doing some iOS development outside of FileMaker previous to this. We've been, about the time that the iPad came out, we realized that this was going to be a huge game changer. So we got into doing some iOS development and working on a CRM system that works on the iPad. And we've learned a lot about what Apple expects for applications in terms of interface and usability, and so that's helped us quite a bit. Also, we are the developers of FM Starting Point, which is a free CRM software that's available for download, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Briefly, I want to introduce Margaret Carlton over here. Margaret, say hi. This is Margaret. Margaret's one of the folks that helped at DevCon and has been presenting with us, along with Garrett Debsky, who can't make it today because he's off on vacation. So, back to the slideshow. This presentation has a technical companion piece to it. It's called the FileMaker Go training tool. This presentation is a lot about usability, but part of it is more technical, and so if you feel like this presentation is lacking the technical components you'd like to see, download this free FileMaker training tool and go through it. We will be looking at this during the course of the presentation, but I'm not going to get into all the pieces, but the technical parts of what you might want to dig into are in here. It's free. You can download this at rcconsulting.com, right, Margs? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's rcconsulting.com. At the top says free downloads. You click that and you can load this. And the idea is that you load this on your FileMaker Pro computer as well as your FileMaker Go device. And so you can run both parallel and compare the differences in the two, because Go and Pro are somewhat different. And so we want to talk about the usability here quite a bit. So the goals of this presentation are to enable FileMaker developers to effectively modify their applications, right? It's all about end-user acceptance and usability. End users need to be able to take the application and use it effectively out in the field, because these devices are all designed for users who are in motion. The whole idea with mobile connectivity with these devices, it's designed really not to be sitting at a desk or in a cubicle, but to be out on the road. So we want to make sure the end users are using this effectively. And of course you say, well, we always try to make them use it effectively. The issue here is that the usability issues that go into this device are different than what goes into FileMaker Pro. Another issue we want to look at is understanding the difference in the platforms. We talked about this. This is different than on FileMaker on this device is different than it is in FileMaker on a laptop or on a desktop computer. The other issue we want to look at, of course, is understanding the essential Apple human interface guidelines. Apple is successful with this platform, right? And one of the things they're successful about is the fact that they've recommended certain ways of designing the user interface, certain things that you should do, certain ways of trying to help the user navigate through the system. So we want to talk about that in great length. Now, I need to say something up front here, and that is, I'm not married to Apple in this development process. I'm married to a company that's successful, that has great hardware. The software is integrated and it works really, really well together. They're married together very well. And so, to be honest, it's not, and this is not a pro-Apple presentation. If this was a Microsoft device and Microsoft was very successful with this, then we would be doing a Microsoft, FM Go on a Microsoft operating mobile system, right? But right now, Apple is one of the huge successful players in the mobile platform field, and we're going to be looking at FileMaker Go on that platform. My assumptions is that most everyone has built FileMaker Pro databases who's going to watch this presentation, and they understand when I say FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Server, FileMaker on the LAN, on the WAN, maybe even runtime. If I say the word client or runtime, things like that, you understand what I'm talking about. Another assumption is that everyone has played with the iPhone or iPad to some degree. Now, an important critical component of what I try to explain to folks is that a lot of folks, unless they play with these devices, don't fully understand what they can do for them. They don't understand the return on investment of what this device can do running FileMaker on it for your organization. So as a result, I say, hey, there's this return on investment. There's these things that occur, but unless you personally experience the device and play with it, you don't fully get it. And so I will say things to you today, and if you're not a user of the iPad or the iPhone, you'll go, oh, well, I don't understand what he's talking about. It's a visceral understanding. When you live with this device for even a week, and then a month, you'll start to have these revelations about what it can do for you. You'll start to understand how it can affect your business and how it can solve issues that you may have in your business. You know, problems that that are occurring. Maybe your sales force is not as effective as possible, or the warehouse folks are not doing fulfillment in an efficient way. So it's one of those things that we want to think about, that you may not understand what I'm saying, but if you go and play with this device and use it, and I'm not saying play with it at the Apple store, that won't be enough exposure. I'm saying expose yourself to it on a day-to-day basis for a week or a month. You'll begin to understand what I'm talking about. So one of the things I see people say to me, this exact quote: the iPhone screen is too small to be useful for anything other than dialing a phone. I don't see the justification for the cost of the AT&T service. Now, I'm not going to sit and justify AT&T's level of service, right? Certainly, in some areas it's great, in some areas it needs to be improved. But the bottom line is that people who are saying statements like this don't understand that these mobile devices can do a great deal to help their organization in terms of efficiency out in the field. Now, these devices aren't going to be for every organization, but I would guess 70% of the organizations out there have some sort of field component where you need to have access to the data in a real meaningful way, out away from the office. And FileMaker Go is a great solution for that. One of the other quotes that we see is, oh, we're a Windows shop. We don't want Macs in our office. We don't know anything about Macs. And Macs are from Satan, right? And so this gets back to people thinking that because it comes from Apple, it's a Mac. Okay, these are not devices that are Macintoshes that have been smashed down into little tiny boxes and resold with a new label. These are a completely different operating system. If you understand and know about iPhones, you don't know anything about Macs, and vice versa. Just like if you know a lot about Windows, you don't know anything about these. It's a completely different operating system, and the software is not interoperable between the different systems. So this gets to the major point. FileMaker Go is a new platform, and this is our first steps on the moon. This is FileMaker Go 1.0, but it's got the FileMaker 11 engine in it. That keeps it compatible with the Pro product, which is currently Pro 11, but this is Go 1.0, not Go 11. Okay? As a result, it doesn't have every little feature and bell and whistle that we would hope. Of course, being 1.0, FileMaker's been very responsive. They're up to a number of bug releases already with it. They've fixed a number of things, and they're going to add new features. They showed some of the new features that are going to come out at the developer conference. So people need to understand that initially we don't get everything we wanted. When NASA went to the moon for the very first time, they got out of the ship. Neil Armstrong got out. He stepped on the ground. He planted a flag, grabbed some dirt and a rock, he climbed in a ship and flew away. That was the entire mission, and everyone was like really happy because that was the objective. Well, FileMaker Go 1.0 has limited objectives. It does a lot, but it doesn't do everything just yet. Now, of course, as we went forward, NASA went back to the moon years later, and they had a four-wheeler. They're driving all over the place, they're boonie crashing, jumping jumps and all that kind of stuff. And this is like the predecessor to the Ford Explorer, right? This is long before there was what they called an SUV, right? This guy also got out of the SUV, and he also had a golf club, right, and golf balls, and he's winging golf balls on the moon, for real, no kidding. And of course, you know, it was a totally different experience. So as time progressed forward, and we got new versions of the space program, they went to the moon and did new and cool and different things that we'd never done before. Driving SUVs on a different planet. Oh, that's like kind of big, right? So So understand the big difference in the platforms is multi-touch versus point and click. Some people say gesture-based computing. I mean, you're using gestures. I always confused about gestures because I don't want to be, hey, he gave me the gesture, right? No, but you know, you're on your device, you got your finger, you're interacting with it, and so that's what's important to understand. Now, if you're a developer consultant, you're in-house or you're an outside consultant like my company is, you need to understand that your customers are already dreaming about this technology. They are dreaming about it because they see it as a way of solving problems. Now, not all your customers are dreaming about it. Some of them are. They're thinking about what issues they can avoid or overcome or problems to fix, right? That type of thing. Now, of course, I immediately thought of where I was with the iPad and where I could be with the iPad. And then I thought to myself, where should I be? And of course, then I realized that Gene Roddenberry had thought about this technology years ago, all the way back to the original Star Trek. And this, of course, is me on the bridge of the Enterprise back when it was a big tourist thing in Las Vegas before it was all closed down. Of course, we cut in the photo of the iPad. Now, it's funny, as it were, that when that came out, the devices that you see people running around with, they call them pads, right? They were called pads. It was the PADD, right? So Steve Jobs, being the infinite person of brilliance, came up with a device, put an I on the front, dropped the D, and we have $1 billion product, right? So that's then. This is the here and now. The here and now is aircraft maintenance schedules. What are you going to do with your aircraft? The FAA wants schedules adhered to. Warehousing, pulling parts lists off of parts, knowing what your inventory levels are. All these types of things are really can be problem solved well with FileMaker Go on a mobile device, okay? With the phone or the pad, all that type of stuff. So, let's get to the meat of the presentation. The presentation is about how we optimize this for our end users. Now, really, I don't care about power users and FileMaker developers because at the end of the day, they're not the ones that pay the bills, okay? The power users can go into FileMaker Go and immediately open a database and it works. In fact, most developers, people first get FileMaker Go, they open it up and they say, wow, this works. But the problem is that the screen's really big, it shrinks down, it scales down. We're going to talk about some of these issues. The databases are not tuned for this device. Now, device tuning is a critical component of what we're talking about going forward. End users need that tuning. If they don't, you're going to have solutions that are ambiguous, lacking clarity. As a result, you run the risk of failure, and if you fail, you get a bad performance review, or your customer is unhappy with you, that type of thing. We want to avoid the failure. And to do that, we need to tune our FileMaker applications to run on specific devices. Now, everyone here we assume is a power user, and so we're going to talk to you like you're a power user or developer. But we want your end users to be successful. That's really the goal of this presentation, to get your head around what that means, okay? To create great usability for your end users. And part of creating great usability is looking at what Apple has done in terms of success already with the iPhone. Now, there are other platforms out there that may challenge Apple going forward, but no one can argue that the iPhone is a hugely dominant platform for the mobile technology. And so we want to look at the recommendations they have and see what things we can apply to our own FileMaker databases to make them useful. So that all starts with Apple's Human Interface Guidelines. These guidelines are written. These are the PDF copies of my personal documents, and of course I go through them and I start scribbling and making notes. But there's an iPad version of it, there's an iPhone version of it, and they're free PDFs that are available for download. There's a link to them inside our training tool that we have. And specifically, Apple says, expect to spend large portions of your development time taking in the iPhone, iOS experience, right? And understanding what the usability looks like and means, okay? Now this is obviously for people who haven't done a lot of iOS development. If you've already done a lot of iOS development, then you're going to understand viscerally some of the interface guidelines that Apple's talking about. So let's take a look. One of the first things that Apple talks about is you have to redesign elements for the screen, and you have to jettison things overboard that are not absolutely essential. And so in this case, we're talking about the phone, right? So here's the iPhone, right? It has a tiny screen compared to a 27-inch PC or Mac desktop, okay? Or even a 17-inch laptop. This screen is 3.5 inches or so, around that range, 3.5 inches. You don't have room for all the interface elements that you would normally put on a database. And specifically, the 80-20 rule applies here. The 80-20 rule is for Mr. Norris, who's trying to sleep with us in the back. See, if anybody sleeps in my presentation, I call them out, right? So we had the one guy sleeping in our presentation. We had a photo of him on our website, right? So you don't sleep in my presentations, right? Never do that. The 80-20 rule is specifically that 80% of your users only use 20% of the features. So if you build 10 features in your system, 80% of your users are only going to use 2. Those 2 features you need to focus on and develop in here. The other 80% of your solution, you don't need. You jettison, you throw it over the fence, as Bill Heiser would say. I like Bill Heiser, great systems engineer for FileMaker. So, next slide. Now, this is not how to be successful, okay? The guilty parties who developed this interface will remain nameless, but you don't want to take a screen like this and try to smash it down and fit it on an iPhone. It's just not going to work very well. This is another one. This is actually the even better. It's got the fluorescent background with extra fluorescent buttons and with a quit button at the top, which I thought was very cute, right? So, this is called the angry fruit salad, right? And of course, when I looked up in the dictionary, I saw the very first line here, and it says abuse. And I thought that was really funny because that's exactly what it is. We're abusing the end user. So we don't want to do that if possible. That being said, we want to focus on workflow. And very specifically, we have this terminology that was come up from by Michael Prescott, one of our senior engineers who's done a lot of work with FileMaker over the years. And very specifically, we want to talk about the concept of directed workflow. Now, workflow itself is a process that an organization follows beginning to end to get their job done. But directed workflow is where we very carefully direct them through the process from A to B to C. We don't let them jump from A to D or A to E. It's A, B, C, D. Very linear process that they follow to complete their development. Most successful iPhone applications follow a very linear process. We don't allow people to jump around. So there's applications out there that are like the photo postcard application. So you take a picture, you select a postcard, you type your message, you type the email, you hit send. That's the entire process. It's a hugely successful postcard application that's out there on the App Store, right? And it's very linear. They don't get to jump to this part, then jump to that part, and then have confusion, right? If you have workflow, but it's somewhat non-directed, right? We call it non-directed or not misdirected. Misdirected is where you tell your users to go the wrong way. But non-directed workflow is where it's a little more vague in terms of what kind of options you're giving them. So, this is a visualization of what directed workflow was. I was driving down the road, driving up to meet Rick Colcock up in Reno, and we were in this freeway, right? And I got my minivan, and we're driving along, and I go, oh my gosh, this is directed workflow, right? And specifically, I'm in this lane, I got concrete barrier on the left, concrete barrier on the right, and of course I don't want to take my minivan and try to like four-wheel and get up on the concrete and ride it sideways and flip it over. I mean, it might be fun in a video game, but in a, $30,000 minivan, it's not so cool, right? So it's directed, and I can go forward, and if I'm really nervy, I can stop and go backward, right? As long as no one runs into me, right? But the idea is very linear, and you don't have a lot of options. Now, directed workflow doesn't mean there are no options. This means there might be one option, and down the road there might be another option. But it's not like a LA, Los Angeles freeway interchange where there's 28 looping freeway bypass thingy spaghetti mess, right? And that would be, of course, non-directed workflow. Oh, okay, so hang on, Margaret. Yep. It's time for a demo. So let's switch over to our simulator. Okay. So this is Margaret. She's going to drive our demo for you. I'm going to walk through it. And we're demoing this on our simulator. Now we're going to demo the demo inspections. Now what this is a prototype tool for the County of Santa Clara. Now each property inspector would go out during the day and have a list of inspections they're supposed to accomplish. And so they see a list of inspections here. They can start any one of the inspections. So let's go ahead and start an inspection, Margaret. And of course we get the next screen of information here, right? We have the next screen, we have the contact information here. So we have this contact screen. We can even hit a button, right, and dial right here, which is pretty slick because the iPhone will actually dial. Of course, we're in the simulator here. It won't dial on the simulator, right? Nowhere to go. But it's very basic interface. We didn't want to go off with a crazy interface. So we have this whole interface here. Scroll down. And we have the ability to go forward and backward. Once again on the freeway, we can go forward, backward. Now we went forward. Okay. Now we have additional fields of information. We can click in these fields, of course. It'll spawn the keyboard. We can make changes if we want, right? Okay. And we can press the button up here. Of course, Margaret has to quit. She's been drinking and driving the mouse, which is a tricky condition, right? So anyway, yeah, so we get the whole idea that we have this interface that we can work with. Now, we also built the interface on the iPad because the folks at the County of Santa Clara were going, well, you know, I'm not sure if we're getting enough information on here, if this really works for us, because the screen is awful small. And that's, of course, the iOS platform. iOS is a platform. It's not just one device. They're going to have devices of all sorts of sizes, I would assume. It's been successful. So far, we have the iPhone and we have the iPad, right? So let's take a look at what this might look like on the iPad. I'm going to go and switch on the iPad here. Go ahead and switch over there, Margaret. So here we are on the iPad. We can see my screen here. And I'm going to go ahead and go into FileMaker Go down here. And I'm going to go ahead and look at the FileMaker Go demo inspections. Now, we built this inspection two different ways, right? We built it on this screen here, which is a landscape screen. And so we have more information here, and we have a very linear process. Once again, we can begin an inspection. And of course, now we have still forward and back, so we have this linear directed workflow. But at the same time, we have additional tab information that we can access. And we also have our super container, which is document management capabilities. We can actually see a document. We have enough screen real estate with the iPad to see additional information, right? And of course, if we want to make an edit here, we can click into a field. It spawns the keyboard. We can make additional changes, right? Pretty slick stuff, right? And of course, I can say next. And we go to the next screen. And FileMaker Go is fully integrated with email. So we have the ability to take a look at email. Beep, beep. And we see a pre-formatted email that we can be sent out to my boss or sent out to a person. The whole idea with the inspection database is we're looking for code violations, right? So if someone violates a city code in terms of what they're doing, you know, fire safety or inappropriate use of a property, you know, say they take an apartment and they turn into a 7-Eleven, that's inappropriate use of residential zoning. So they're looking for zoning violations and all types of things. So this gives us an idea. Now this is with a landscape view. Now we also have the same solution set up by Michael Prescott. So I'm going to go ahead and switch right now to a form that's been done in landscape mode. I'm going to briefly zoom out here so we can all see this, right? So we're on the iPad still, but we have a screen that's designed to be in portrait mode. Now this was developed by Michael Prescott. It's an alternate look at the same kind of screen. Now this is directed workflow again, okay? But instead of flipping through various screens, we start on the same screen and we linearly work our way from top to bottom on the screen. Okay? The idea being that we are doing an inspection, and by the time we get to the bottom, and we add new additional records down at the bottom, we have full ability to approve or disapprove or make changes look good, right? And so this person passed their inspection. Congratulations, right? The idea is that we have a vertical form here. We don't have to do it in landscape. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and flip back to our directed workflow presentation. And next slide, Mark. Thanks. So when to deploy the iPhone, right? So we have this wonderful device called the iPhone. When do you deploy it? It should be fairly obvious when you deploy it. That's when you need a small device, right, that fits in your pocket, that you need access to your FileMaker database. But you have a very limited screen, and you must use, to be successful, directed workflow. Okay? If you need lots of room on the screen, or you need a non-directed workflow type of application, you really should think about another device. Now this one also has a camera on it. Now we can all hope someday that the iPad will have a camera. For now it doesn't. So this has a camera, so that could be useful as well, right? So there are reasons to use this device. And it makes a phone call, right? The iPad, strictly speaking, doesn't dial the phone unless you use Skype or something like that. So let's take a look at one more demo. Margaret, why don't you jump back to the simulator. Let's go ahead and drop out and go back to FileMaker Go. And we don't want to connect there. Let's go ahead and look at the demo. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now we're pretending we're Andy Lacates. Andy Lacates is the head field systems engineer for FileMaker. He's based out of Georgia, I believe. Great guy. And we built this demo for him for DevCon. And so what this is a training tool that allows my engineers to log their time on their iPhone while they're out at a customer site. One of the big issues I have is that engineers would make a note that they've done work for them. Like the engineer behind the camera is Calvin Mosiman, and Calvin's one of these guys that does a pretty good job of logging his time, but some engineers are not as good as Calvin, right? And as a result, they will tend to write their time entries on a post-it note, and then it goes into a pocket somewhere, and then they wander home, and they lose track, and then it never quite gets fully into the computer until a week later we lose track of it. So the idea is that Garrett Debsky, on his own accord actually, one of our senior staff, he went off and built this application that we see, right? And this application specifically allows us to log time for projects. Now we have 3 time entries already for the 18th, but let's go ahead and click on the date up here at the top. And we're going to say, let's go ahead and roll the date forward. We like the month. The month is good, but today's date, let's go forward a couple days here, pick a new day. All right, great. Now we're going to add a time entry. Now these are the projects as an engineer that I have selected. This application knows who I am. It's determined that these are the projects I'm allowed to access. And so let's go ahead and Kalman's Pizza Palace, right? And we can pick, these are subtasks that are available, right? So let's pick one of these subtasks. And we can put time in. We have a time override allows us to put the time in decimal, like say 6.5 or whatever we want to do. And then we can write a description here. Now the engineers are required to put a robust description in. And see, now Margaret is hamming it up here. And the problem is, the reason is I require the engineers to actually put a fairly robust description. We've had invoices that we were going to send to a customer that I inspect invoices frequently before they go to the customer. And the description for the engineer, he said he logged 6.5 hours of time, and he actually wrote, did stuff. Okay? Now Margaret's being cute here, right? But did stuff is not a good description of your time to the customer, right? So we like a full description that they worked on this report, and they did this stuff, we did this training, and we drove this customer site, and all this kind of stuff, right? So, and it would be a fairly robust description. In fact, sometimes we will actually even take maybe emails or something from a customer and paste it in here so we have proof of what they've done. So this is a time log system. We can go ahead and hit that. Okay? And the system knows at this point, go ahead and continue, Margaret, that the time entry is completed. We've completed the time entry for today. Now this application here runs locally on this device. It is not a hosted solution. It runs locally on the iPhone. The engineers can enter it anytime. It's not dependent upon them having access to the 3G network with AT&T or a Wi-Fi network. They can log it anytime. Then at the end of the day, when they get back into cell phone coverage, they can press a button and it logs their time automatically to the corporate system. Now it's going to ask for access and that type of thing. We're going to say cancel. But the idea, yeah, it's unhappy that we didn't log the time. The whole idea is that we press a button once we're in range, we set the phone down, and it runs a script that updates the corporate system from the local device. Now because of the hibernation issues that have to do with the home page, our scripts check to make sure that they have been completed properly. But the big issue is to make sure that the script's complete. If they don't complete, the next time you come back in, it will finish the work for you. It'll give you an error message saying it hasn't been completed, and then we take the next step. So at any rate, that is the time entry tool that works on the iPhone. And once again, this is a synchronized solution, so it does a one-way synchronization up to the main corporate FileMaker database. Okay, let's go back to slideshow. So that's when to deploy the iPhone, right? The next is when to deploy the iPad, and we kind of covered this. When you need to do a little bit more heavy lifting, right? If you have to write more than about a sentence with the iPhone, maybe a couple sentences, it's going to get really irritating, okay? If you have to write more than a couple paragraphs, the iPad can get irritating. You want a desktop computer. And of course people say, well, just take a keyboard with you. Well, if you need a keyboard on your iPad, I would say, dude, I'm not allowed to say, I can't say dude, but dude, just take a laptop computer, right? That's the whole idea, right? If you need a mouse and a keyboard and a little, mocha cup holder for your Starbucks, and you turn your iPad into a desktop computer, then why didn't you just take your desktop computer, right? So just things to think about. People tend to use their iPads like they use their desktops. That's a tendency we see. And it's also something to point out in Apple's human interface guidelines. So just keep that in mind. We've actually gone into the FM starting point solution. And what we did is we took the screen that was designed for the desktop and we enhanced the size of the fields. We enhanced the size of the buttons to make sure that they operate smoothly on the iPad. Now this is non-directed. There's no like A to B to C. This is undirected. I mean, people can go anywhere and do anything, but that's, in the CRM system, might be appropriate. On a phone, it's going to be a really poor solution because you're not going to be able to see this information very well, and you'll spend most of your time trying to hunt down and figure out how to operate and do your job out in the field. So, tuning the directed workflow. What are the traits that iOS users are going to have that are using your solution? Now maybe it's a general horizontal solution that everyone uses, right? But sometimes we're developing a solution where people are business people, maybe they're Harvard graduates, they're doing stock quotes and things like that, or there may be general contractors who spend more time nailing nails and hammering hammers and all that kind of stuff. More time nailing nails and screwing screws, right? And so they see this device as a tool to help them in their job. It's not a fun play toy, right? So they want it to be as efficient and clear as possible with no ambiguity, right? Which gets us to usability testing. The idea, taps are cheap. This has been talked a lot about at DevCon. The concept comes from David Bernard in the iPhone User Interface Design Projects book. He wrote a chapter of that book, and he put forth the idea that finger interface is a very intuitive control. Much more intuitive than a mouse and a pointer, right? So developers for years, I've been doing this 20 years, and a lot of developers have been doing it many more years than that, they get into this concept that they have to take their solution and try to minimize the number of clicks to get a project done, right? And so Mr. Norris is asking the question, he sent me the question a second ago, he said, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. Well, basically, if you have to complete a task or complete a report, initially you build it and it takes 10 clicks to do, right? But then you say, I'm a smart software developer, I can do it in 5 clicks. So you're down to 5 clicks. Well, that's more efficient, takes less time, that's good, right? And then you say, well, I can do it in 1 click if I hold the Control Option 3 key down. So Control Option 3 on my keyboard, and I can press the mouse button, right? That gets a little crazy because you have to explain to someone on screen, Control Option 3 plus click, right? The idea is taps are cheap. Don't go down that road, okay? You're creating ambiguity in your solution, and ambiguity in these devices is fatal, okay? Because what happens is people will hold the button down, and the icons start quivering and shaking, and then it will say, I would like to get rid of this application. You get X to get deleted off the application. And then the App Store says, hey, would you like to give this a 0-star review and tell everyone how much you hate the application, right? So you don't want to make things ambiguous. You want clarity, right? So UI ambiguity is a real time killer for FM Go. You really need to think about developing your solutions. If they take 2 or 3 or 5 extra clicks, use the extra clicks. Keep it clear so people understand how to use a solution. So, just to reemphasize, taps are cheap. Creating a friendly interface in FM Go is striking a balance between clarity, ambiguity, and limiting the taps. Limiting the taps should be your last concern. Clarity is #1 concern. Because any time that you save in taps, you could blow the whole thing if someone sits there and stares at the screen for 10 seconds trying to figure out what they should do. And if they stare at it much more than about 10-15 seconds, they'll get frustrated, and then you've got problems. Which of course leads us to usability testing. So first off, the Apple Human Interface Guidelines recommends a 44 by 44 pixel size button as the minimum size button that you really want to be working with, okay? Our testing has been that you need to use even larger buttons than that. one of the things that came up in that, and we've seen this before, even sometimes FileMaker, we fall in this trap. When we're first doing testing with these devices, people would say, okay, here's the iPhone or here's the iPad, and you put it down on a desk, and you have the user come in. They're going to do usability testing. You put it down on the desk, and you say, hey, I want you to do these 5 tasks. We got a camera on you here. We're going to record what you do, make sure it's clear, right? There's no ambiguity, right? And so we put the device down, and you click these 5 things, and you get gold stars because you press the button, you complete it, right? The problem is that that's not how these devices are used, right? We're doing usability testing in a desk, right? You want to do usability testing, it's actually kind of tricky. You actually have to tell the person to, here, take your device and walk from point A to point B and press the buttons. Right? For those of you who like to see me go the other way, right? You're going to go to point A and point B and press the buttons. Now, pushing a button while you're in motion can be a real hassle. In fact, frankly, what you find out is that 44 by 44 is way, way, way too small. Okay? To be clicking and walking. At the FileMaker Developer Conference, there were actually 2 kind of separated hotels, and there was a sidewalk. And you walk back and forth the sidewalk. It takes about 4 or 5 minutes to walk the sidewalk. That's a normal size sidewalk. And you might have 50, 100 people on the sidewalk over the course of this, quarter mile sidewalk, right? Or eighth of a mile, whatever it is. Pretty short space. But people will be drinking Starbucks with one hand. And they'd be trying to instant message with their other hand. And they're drinking like this and walking. And trying not to fall off the sidewalk or run into the person next to them, right? Which was a real hassle. So I thought it was really hysterically funny because I at one point I stopped and got off the side and I watched people. And I realized, even at the developer conference, I'm supposed to be speaking on this, I'm supposed to be an expert, right, kind of, some sort of pseudo-expert, temporary expert for the day, right, that I didn't know anything. Because usability, because these devices are for people who are in motion, they're not people who put the device down their desk and then click the button, okay? So bigger buttons, 75 by 75 is a good area to start. The ones you can really hit with a Starbucks in your hand while you're in motion are about 95 by 95. They're pretty big buttons. They're the same buttons that we saw on some of the time logging solution, right? When we log our time, we start that process. Some of these buttons are pretty large. Sloppy fingers make for poor pictures, right? So the idea is that you do usability testing, and that fingers are not mice, and the precision issues go out the window, right? One of the issues that came up, we did some usability testing with this lady who's my somewhere between an office manager and secretary and accountant. She kind of wears all these hats, and she's what I would call a habitual offender, right? She habitually cannot click buttons reliably on the iPad. Now she owns an iPad. She's been using it for months since they came out, but she's got fingernails. And she grew up with 8-track tapes were the hot item. I mean, she's been around the block for a while, right? And even when she's sitting still, it's sometimes hard for her to press the button and reliably get where she needs to go. And so she's what I would call an habitual offender, right? And so we had to divide, we're sitting at a testing FM starting point, and we go, oh, okay, click this button, Deb. And she goes, click, miss, click, miss, click, miss. Okay. Engineers, bigger button. She's missing it, right? Make the button bigger, try it again. Click, miss, click, miss, click, hit. Click, miss, click, miss. Okay, bigger button again. So we go from these buttons that we thought were okay to really large buttons. So the idea of usability testing. Now that's not without her even walking down the sidewalk. If she walked down the sidewalk, I'm afraid because she's a habitual offender, she'd probably kill 3 people and drop the iPad, right? So it's just one of those sort of things I have concerns about. And she's going to watch this video and we're all in deep trouble. So buttons and zooming, right? So one of the things that we noticed when she was testing, okay, and then it was already bugging me. It's one of these little issues that's bugging you, but you really can't get your head around it. It's like the little buzzing fly, and you don't really notice you're busy. You don't notice the fly's buzzing around your head because, and I'm like, what? Right? And so is buttons and zooming. And what FileMaker does is that you're in FileMaker, and we'll go and do a flip over here the Elmo and take a look at this. You're in FileMaker, and we're testing a solution. And in fact, we'll go over to the training tool. This is a great opportunity to fire up the training tool. And I'm going to say training tool. I'm going to open it up. And we talked about this being a great extra piece of technology. I'm going to say usability. And item number 10 on usability is what I call zoom sickness. And what happens is that we would sit there, we're testing FM starting point, and Deb would miss the button, right? She'd click and she'd miss the button, right? So she'd miss the button, but she knows that the pressure's on, she's in a hurry, so she tries to click it again really quickly, right? And so what happens is she tries to click and she misses it, and she'll click it again real quick. And what happens is FileMaker reads that as a double click, which is a zoom request. And FileMaker has a very interesting algorithm, which I think probably should be revisited someday. And that is, it attempts to see the rectangular areas that you're working in and tries to zoom on those. So the problem is that, say I'm trying to hit tricks. Now tricks is pretty big. She wouldn't miss that, but let's just say she did. I zoomed a whole lot there. And I'm like, ugh, right? Tap again, maybe it de-zooms, right? Or pinch, I'll pinch and swirl and this whole interface, right? So the rub was that we had a lady who was trying to hit the button. She misses the button, and she ends up zooming. She's going to the wrong place. She wanted to go into here, right? But she ends up going somewhere else. And so instead of going where she wanted to go, we direct her the wrong place. Then the screen's enlarged to some random, what appears to be to her a random amount of zoom. And she doesn't know how to undo that. So there's this end-user frustration issue that comes in almost immediately. So one possible fix for this, and it depends who you ask, in the community, they think, well, no, people expect to be able to zoom and stuff because it's an iOS device. All right, well, that's fine. But if we have people who are new to the platform and they're trying to use this, right? They don't care about zooming. If you've built your interface and retuned it for the device, then you shouldn't have to zoom the screen because the fonts are plenty big enough. You've done a great job. You don't need to zoom, right? So I'm going to run a script right here which sets the device to 100% and it locks. So now, if I miss the button, I'm still good. It doesn't zoom and kind of wander off the reservation, right? I can't, there's no zooming here. It doesn't allow that to work. Now I can still scroll up and down or left and right if necessary. But this is not the default behavior. The default behavior is to have the zooming off so you can zoom in and out. So something to consider in your database usability development is that if people miss the button and they try to hit it quickly, they're likely to cause a zoom, and then that may not be very good for you. So testing your user interface. So we train our engineers, obviously, especially the new ones. You got to test on Windows. You got to test on the Mac because the fonts render differently, right? Calvin, shake your head up and down. Yes, you know what I'm talking about, right? Good, Calvin, okay? Vertical spacing on the iOS. We now have to test on a third platform, okay? Basic issue is that largely the fonts, if you have fonts that take an object, say it's this big on your screen, left and right, they typically tend to take the same amount of space, but vertically what happens is that they need more vertical space. They actually take another 10% or so vertically. And so you need to take your object handles and drag them down and leave space. Otherwise you'll see these spots on your database where the last line is like half cut off, right? So just keep in mind, the fundamental is test your interface on all three platforms. But understand that to really stay out of trouble, you need to drag the handles of an object a little bit bigger so on the iOS it has room to grow. Right? Same thing on the Mac and Windows. The Mac, you're developing in the Mac and you take it to Windows, you'd always make sure you had extra space to the left or to the right because in Windows it would tend to spread laterally, right? The font would, just the way it renders. The operating system is different. iOS is different. It tends to render vertically a little differently. These are the fonts that are currently supported on these devices. These fonts cannot be added to or taken away from unless you jailbreak your phone, and that's not a place I like to go because I want to make sure my device is as reliable as possible, and I don't want to get into that with Apple. So these are the fonts. Typically all the fonts that you need are going to be in here. The iPhone and iPod Touch use a subset of the fonts, less fonts. So just need to keep that in mind as you're doing your development. But this is a list of fonts. Now of course if you're going to do fluorescent chalk duster all the time, we're back to Angry Fruit Salad. Recommend Calvin. Don't be doing Angry Chalk Duster. Angry Chalk Duster. That's what it will be after you use it in fluorescent green. Angry Chalk Duster. So, don't give your database the finger. Apple's Human Interface Guidelines talks about discussing the placement of buttons, right? Specifically in the manual, they say the button should go on the top or on the bottom. And if the buttons don't go on the top or the bottom, then there are other considerations to take into account. Specifically, people will hold the iPad with a non-dominant hand, and they will use, as they are walking, remember they're in motion, they're not sitting down, as they're walking, they're going to use their device, hold it with a non-dominant hand, they'll be pointing and clicking with their dominant hand. Or, alternatively, they'll hold with two hands, which is what I do, right? And I use my thumbs to interface with the device. I tend to do that because I like to thumb type anyway, right? The point is that the whole idea here is that you don't want to get into a conversation where, what you don't realize, and I'll show you this right now, is that your pointing device, which is your finger, is attached to this huge hand and arm. And you're like, well, what? What? Well, think about the pointer on your computer. What's it attached to? Nothing. It magically flies through air on its own. It's like a little Superman with a cape. It flies through the screen. And there's nothing behind it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and flip over here. I'm going to fire up a solution that we've been developing for a company called Advanced Energy. And Advanced Energy sells batteries, and so we built a tool that allows us to go into the system and to look at the screen. Now what we have here are some filtering portals. Specifically on these filtering portals, it was a situation where we really couldn't run the buttons across the top. We have some buttons up here. We really couldn't run the buttons along the bottom because portals fundamentally are vertical objects. They don't run laterally, right? So what would happen is that we said, well, I want to build these portals, and so as I click the portals, they filter, right? So I press the button, and it filters. Say if I missed it there, try it again. Usability, right? And then I can say it's a 3-cell battery. And as I go this way, the portals filter, and I get fewer and fewer choices as my selection narrows down, right? And so I got into a conversation with one of my engineers, who's going to be really mad at me when he sees the fact that he's made the presentation. He gets into this conversation with me. He goes, "Boss, I don't think the navigation should be on the right side." I go, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, because the navigation has always been on the left side, the buttons, which means that the portals would be on the left side." And I go, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because we've always done it that way since like I've ever worked here, and people expect navigation to be on the left side." And I go, And now we'll call him Chuck. Right, because we don't want to use his real name, which would be Jay, right? So we'll call Jay Chuck. So Chuck, we're talking to Chuck, and Chuck goes, no. So he was really adamant about this. I mean, really adamant about this, and it was a very funny conversation. And what was happening was that Chuck had not used the iPad very much. He had been assigned an iPad from the company to use for the development, but the FM Go had only been out about a week, 2 weeks, and he had just been basically starting to play with it. Okay. And he hadn't been into the iPhone yet, per se. So he didn't have this experience yet of dealing with these devices. All he knew is what he had from his years of FileMaker experience. And the point is that he wasn't mentally prepared for the differences in the platform. Okay? Now, he'll probably watch this video and start to argue with me. But watch this, right? How can you argue with this demo? Okay? So let's go back to here to my video here. And so we're pressing the buttons as we go to the left, things start to filter down. And we get down here to the end, and eventually we have, a photo or whatever we have, a product information, a photo would show up here, right? Well, if we reset the list, and say you said we built the button on the navigation on the left side, right, which is what we wanted to do, well, it would look something like this, right? Now, never mind the fact that everything's upside down. So then, I'm right-handed, right? And if I hold the device with my left hand over here, I'm holding the device with my left hand, right? And I put my right hand over here, and this is what I'm doing. And suddenly, your pointing device is attached to your hand and your arm. You got this huge piece of meat blocking the screen, right? That's what it is. It's blocking the screen, right? You can't see what's going on. So as I press a button here, okay, things are happening underneath my hand. I can't see, right? You're giving your database the finger. Don't give your database the finger, okay? So the idea is that if I was doing this, I'd be going back and forth, right? Holding it back and forth. It makes for a goofy interface. And so the idea is that this is a new platform. The rules that you had previously don't apply anymore, right? You need to have an interface that doesn't block, your hand doesn't block. Now, of course, I'm at the developer conference, and one of the people we were doing a presentation on this, and one of the people go, well, why don't you build the interface on left or right? I said, well, if you have the time and the budget and the customer says, yeah, we can do it, we'll build the whole interface with a left-handed dominant interface, or you can tell the system that you're right-handed and it can flip the whole interface the other side, which is totally correct. It's applicable, right? But, you know, it's a budget issue and you have to build the layout and restructure the, you know, the screen. And you have to have the time and the money to do that, and you have to determine that you have, you know, two left-handed employees in the company that you care enough to spend an extra, you know, $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 on, so they're happy out in the field, right? Now it's less of an issue on the phone because really there's so little room on the phone that your fingers end up covering the phone anyway to some degree. But on the pad, if you put buttons left or right, you need to think about. I'm not saying the button should always be on the right or always on the left, but you need to look at where they are, and then see how big of a blockage you have on your screen. Okay. Back to the slideshow. Miscellaneous Technologies. So I'm going to get some additional caffeine here because, once again, the presenter must have sufficient caffeine to keep presenting. Any questions from the audience? Okay, so now we have a warning here. So Miscellaneous Technologies. First off, my company owns a site license for base elements. It's a product that we use to do doing analysis of FileMaker databases. It tells us what's in the database and how it's in the database. And the next slide shows that what you do is after you run the DDR, and if I say the word DDR, just go learn what it means. It's what you get. It's a process you can run with the Database Design Report in FileMaker Pro Advanced. It gives you an analysis, and specifically when you feed into base elements will identify the issues that may not work so well in FileMaker Go. It'll identify certain scripts that aren't supported. Now, as we go on, remember the first step's on the moon. We're on the moon 1.0, right? As we go farther along and we have more steps, more of these steps will work, right? But the point is they'll update base elements and that type of thing. Now, I also know Inspector from Vince Manano will do this too, but my company hasn't been using that product in a while, so something to check out. But I know that we use base elements quite a bit with great success. Super container. Okay, this is really big. Jesse Barnum from 360 Works has got a product called Super Containers Document Management. 80% of my customers use it. Jesse updated his software so it works with FM Go. And so let me show you a quick demo of what that looks like. We're going to flip over here to Elmo, and I'm going to dive back into our training tool. This is our free training tool that we have available. Once again, we talked about that. And under the web viewers, I can click the web viewer button. And I want to, now this is over 3G network. So in the upper corner, you see that we're on a 3G network. We can interact with documents, PDFs, Word documents, any sorts of documents. We'll start with this. And so what the system's going to do is going to go out on the internet and to our document management server, our super container server, and it's going to give us thumbnails and high speed of documents. Now I have a Word document up here. Correction, a Word document's down here. The PDF's up here. And my icon's not showing up here. I'm not sure why. We'll have to check that out. But or maybe it got removed. Maybe I don't have a Word document here anymore. But the idea is that I can open the file, and while I can't edit a PDF or edit a Word document, I can actually look at these documents and actually read them and interact with them. So I can flip a couple pages here and start reading about whatever PDF that I have. So in the middle of my FileMaker experience, I can look at documents, read documents. I can even do that with video. I can actually stream video straight in to FM Go. And of course this all works great on the desktop, but the idea was to bring parity and equal capabilities to this platform. So I say next issue, and this actually will play a video. It's going to load it off at 3G, if you can believe that, and it's going to play it. It's going to play, it's probably going to chunk. Oh, there it goes. That's off of 3G. Wow. So this is a video that's playing straight in. Oh, thanks for the sneezes back there. There's a video that's playing straight in a web viewer in FM Go. It's a 2.8 megabyte video. You can put sound in it if you like. It's no big deal. And that came right off a server off of 3G. Very powerful capabilities and technology. Lee Lukart, great guy in the San Francisco Bay Area, runs a company called Savvy Data. He is a charting genius, and he has developed the capability to do charts inside web viewers with HTML5 and CSS. And without getting into this in great detail, he's got a free sample solution at savvydata.com that allows you to see how he's building charting, advanced charting, and that type of thing. And this is another sample chart that we have. The technology works great. Excellent technology. Now, real quick, we're about running out of time here in our presentation. I want to talk about benchmarks real quick. What we have is we did some general benchmark performance testing with FileMaker Pro versus FileMaker Go. And all this is in my training tool, so download the training tool. You can see how we did the test. But the bottom line is that when connecting to a FileMaker server over a wide area network, and both devices are using a Wi-Fi network, Pro is generally about twice as fast as Go, or Go is about half as fast. So people say, oh, technology's taken a step backwards, right? And what you end up having is a situation where you have a battery-powered device that runs 8 or 10, 12 hours, okay? And it runs half as fast as a full-loaded desktop computer. That's pretty great, because these don't have a 120 volt power cord dragging around behind them. So this is exceptionally powerful technology. And of course, we can see that we're getting about half the performance here. And from my perspective, that's really great. Because if your goal is to run the company's end-of-the-year financial reports with these devices, that's not so smart, right? You're missing the whole idea of what these devices are for. They're not mobile servers, okay? They're mobile productivity applications to go out and collect and review data by your mobile people out in the warehouse or in the field, anywhere except where the cubicle is or the desk is. Okay? And there's another slide here. You can get into this and look at this. It's all great. But that pretty much concludes, I think, our presentation. And if we have any questions, feel free to email me, right? You guys email me. You can email me direct at info@rcconsulting.com. Or visit our website, rcconsulting.com, and at the top you can download the training tool. All right, thanks.